Honourable Member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's again a pleasure to rise and join debate this morning in the House of Commons. And I'm going to share my time with the member for Fort McMurray Cold Lake. So this bill, C-26, is an important. It's a bill that addresses an important and growing topic. Cybersecurity is very important, very timely. They're calling this bill today. I'm glad that they see this as a priority. I struggle with trying to figure out the priorities of this government from time to time. There were other bills that they had declared as, absolute must-pass bills before Christmas that they're not calling, I see. But it's good to be talking about this instead of, C-21, C-11, some of the other bills that they've got lots of problems with in their own benches, I think. But cybersecurity is something that affects all Canadians. It is no doubt an exceptionally important thing that government needs to address. Cybersecurity is, as the previous speaker said, it is national security. It is critical to the safety and security of all of our infrastructure that underpins every aspect of our lives. We've seen how infrastructure can be vulnerable to cyber attacks. We've seen throughout the world, we have seen how energy infrastructure is vulnerable, like cyber attacks that affect the ability to operate pipelines. We've seen how cyber attacks can jeopardize the functioning of an electrical grid. And, we have experienced at the local level how weather events that bring down power infrastructure can devastate a community and can actually endanger people's health and safety. And one can only imagine what a nationwide or a pervasive cyber attack that managed to cripple a national electrical grid would have on people's ability to live their lives in safety and comfort. So cyber warfare is emerging as a critical component of every country's national defense systems, both offensively and defensively. And the battlefield success of any military force is always dependent on communication, and we know now that just how dependent military forces are on the security of their cyber communication. We see this unfolding in Ukraine, resulting from the horrific criminal invasion of that country by Putin, and we see the vital role that communication and the ability for a country defending itself from a foreign adversary has with respect to its cybersecurity. Critical sectors. Well, I might point out too. There's a study ongoing on this at the National Defense Committee, and we've heard expert testimony about how important cybersecurity is to the Canadian Armed Forces, and I look forward to getting that report eventually put together and tabled with recommendations to the government here in the House of Commons in Canada. We know also that critical sectors of the Canadian economy and our public services are highly vulnerable to cyber attack. Organized crime and foreign governments, they do target information contained within healthcare systems and within our financial system. The potential for a ransom attack, ransom attacks large and small, are a threat to Canadians. But imagine a hostile regime or criminal enterprise hacking a public healthcare system and holding an entire province or an entire country hostage with the threat to destroy or leak or hopelessly corrupt the health data of millions of citizens. And sadly, criminal organizations and hostile governments do this or seek to do this and are busy creating the technology to enable them to do exactly this. The Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics had conducted 3 different studies while I was chair of that committee that were tied to cybersecurity in various different ways. We talked about and learned about the important ways that cybersecurity and privacy protection intersect and maybe and sometimes conflict. We saw how this government contracted with a company, Clearview AI, a company whose business is to scrape billions of images from the internet, identify these images, and then sell them back to identified images, back to governments, and in the case of Canada, to the RCMP. And we heard chilling testimony at that committee about the capabilities of sophisticated investigative tools, spyware, that are used by hostile regimes and by organized crime, but also by our own government that used sophisticated investigative tools to access Canadian cell phones without their knowledge or consent. Now, in Canada, this was limited. It was surprising to learn that this happened, but it happened under judicial warrant and in limited situations by the RCMP. But the RCMP did not notify or consult the Privacy Commissioner, which is required under Treasury Board rules. So this conflict between protecting Canadians, between enforcing our laws and protecting Canadians' privacy is a difficult. It's difficult for governments, and when government institutions like the RCMP disregard Treasury Board edicts or ignore privacy law, the Privacy Commissioner or the Privacy Act, especially when they actually set aside or will ignore a ruling for the Privacy Commissioner, it's quite concerning. So. This bill, it's important, it's worthy of support. Unlike the government's other somewhat related bill, the so-called Digital Charter in C-27, but this bill, make no mistake, has significant new powers for the government. It amends the Telecommunications Act to give extraordinary powers to the Minister over Industry, and it's part of a pattern we're seeing with this government where they introduce bills that have grant significant power to the minister and to the bureaucrats that will ultimately create regulations. So Parliament is really not going to see this fleshed out unless there's significant work done at committee to improve transparency around this bill and to add more clarity around what this bill will actually do and how these powers will be granted. There have been many concerns raised in the business community about how this bill may chase investment and jobs and capital from Canada. The prospect of extraordinary fines without this bill being fleshed out very well, it creates the prospect of enormous liability on companies that may choose not to invest in Canada, not fully understanding the ramifications of this bill. And there's always the capture. We see this time and time again with this government. They seem to write up a bill with maybe 3 or 4 big companies or industries with only a small number of players in Canada. And yet the bill will capture other enterprises, small businesses that don't have armies of lobbyists to engage the government to get regulations that will give them loopholes or lawyers to litigate conflict that may arise as a result of it. So I'm always concerned about the small businesses and the way that they may be captured either deliberately or not by a bill like this. So I will conclude, Mr. Speaker, by saying I support the objective. I agree with the concern that this bill tries to address. I'm very concerned about a number of areas that are ambiguous within this bill. I hope that it's studied vigorously at committee and that strong recommendations are brought back from committee and incorporated into whatever this bill might finally look like when it comes back for third reading.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire. The honourable member for Fleetwood Port Kells.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to invite my honourable colleague to just, take a higher level view of an important issue, because we're dealing here with cybersecurity and the need for protections. But we're also looking at a realm of artificial intelligence, things that can happen. You can 3D print a gun that can't be picked up by airport security. Like, there's a lot of technology out there that could be purposefully harmful to individuals or to our whole society. And in that regard, I'm wondering if, given some of the other conversations we've had about gatekeepers, if the member would care to kind of put a frame around the kind of gatekeeping that he and his party see as essential, necessary for the purpose of protecting Canadians.
Honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Well, the primary function of government is to protect its citizens from external harm, to be able to ensure that Canadians are able to live freely and safely in their communities. And I do have concerns about the gatekeeping aspect of this bill. I'm concerned that if this bill doesn't get the balance of the regulation and the ability of commerce to go on and continue, that we will lose businesses and we will lose services and access to economic activity within Canada if we chase investment out through poorly thought regulations. So yes, there is of course a delicate balance to be had, and if we come down too hard on the side of regulation and gatekeeping, we will result in job loss and lack of investment, which will, and absence of investment will then compound businesses' abilities to actually deliver on cybersecurity.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In recent years, companies and even political parties, through old questionnaires, collect personal data of people who game, but also all the context that these people have on their phones. I would like to know if my colleague has noted this tactic as being ethical, since these people were receiving unsolicited advertising, and also if my colleague thinks that this legislation will end these types of tactics. Thank you. The honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
That may be a better question for the government to answer, but I don't believe that that's the intent of this bill. This bill is about cybersecurity. They have another bill before the House, the C-27, that is a little bit closer into the privacy changes. They haven't proposed changes to the Privacy Act or the Elections Act. So no, I don't think this bill is relevant to the question that the member raised. But she does getting off of cybersecurity into the much broader rubric of the privacy of Canadians. She raises points, but I don't actually connect them to this bill.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for London Fanshawe.
I wanted to ask some questions of the honourable member, more related. I know it's a little bit away from this bill, but he had mentioned within his speech about the work that we are doing in our Committee on Defence on cyber defense and cybersecurity. Two questions, actually. One, there have been calls for declaring within the International Criminal Court making cyber warfare an actual war crime. What does he think about that? But also the fact that we heard that Canada and its institutions, security institutions, actually overclassify information by about 90%, and that we could, if we could declassify a lot of that information, that would actually significantly help a lot of those security organizations deal with the specific threats that we're seeing. I wanted to hear his opinion on that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge. Quick answer.
I thank my colleague from the Defence Committee for those questions. The first one, I'll set aside and await the more testimony and discussion at Defence about that. But on the second point about overclassification of information, that's an important, a good one. I'm glad she raised it, and it actually speaks to the overall culture of secrecy that exists in the Government of Canada. This is a real problem. It's been ongoing for years. This government ran on a platform in 2015 to let the sunshine in, and we have absolutely unprecedented secrecy within this government. And so she raises a good point around overclassification of documents.